Quickly, I just want to share with you, I praise the Lord for a situation that I was involved in this week. If some of you have heard the story about the guy jumping over the counter at Academy Sports and stealing a gun and bullets and then going to shooting a gentleman at a car dealership, I was in the store when all that went down. And luckily, I had been just by the counter back there and do remember noticing someone standing there. Apparently he was refused a gun, and so he decided he would get one anyway. I was up toward the front of the store when some guys come up behind me and told me the situation and said, "You need to get out of here." And so about that time, the intercom came on and was telling everyone they need to get out of the store, active shooter, please evacuate the store. There was no shooting at Academy Sports, thank God. Everyone got out safely. The gentleman did leave, drove to a car dealership. There was a shooting involved in that, and then he was later shot and killed near his home near Holt. Just pray for the families involved in all of that, and the store did a good job, I think, in getting everyone out of there as best they can. To my best of my knowledge, we all walked out with him because he got out. They think that's what happened. He just walked out with everybody else that was evacuated, and he went to his vehicle and left. And so I didn't sprint, but I was moving very quickly, leaving that store. And just the farthest thing from my mind when I walked in there. You don't think about things like that. Carol was in the store 2 stores down. So I had left her there and went down just to walk around and look at stuff. And anyway, didn't stop at the gun counter, which is rare that I didn't. But anyway, I just thank God that everyone was okay there at Academy Sports, and pray for the family and the healing of the gentleman there at the car dealership, and of course the family of the young man. Just a sad situation as we think about that. So I'm very thankful for safety in that situation. This morning, as we think about beginning a new year, as we think about 2020, as we think about what's going to be different this year for us, or is anything going to be different? Things have changed a lot since Carol and I began our ministry here. I think it's going maybe 7 years or 8 years. I've lost track. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was 2013, like March or April of that year. And as I look out over the crowd today, and as I think about that first Sunday that I was here, I do see some familiar faces that were here that first Sunday, but I see a lot of not strange faces. Add in. A lot of good-looking people, and I think everyone would testify to that. So God has truly blessed us. But as we think about, what do we do? Where do we go from there? Or where do we go from here as we think about today? There's a guy on KCMO, a radio, on Saturday mornings, and he has a show called Breaking the Norm. And I can't think of his his full name. Les Norman. Les was a former Kansas City Royal baseball player, matter of fact, and he had a really kind of just a tough, through all that, but I think it was in 1999, he broke in and he made it on the Royals roster. I think he only played maybe 1 year, but he did lead in some categories. But anyway, now he has a show called Breaking the Norm, and it's a very positive show. Les is a Christian. He grew up in a terrible home life, abused, alcoholic father, and he makes the comment, he says, I was given a path, and I chose to make the best of the path that I was given. And he did. He became a Christian, accepted Jesus Christ while he was in his baseball career, and today he praises God for what has come of his life and his family's life. But I think about that term, breaking the norm. And folks, I think we have to, as the church of 2020, in America today, or even across the world, sometimes we have to think about, we're going to have to break the norm. Because if we continue to be the norm, then I don't know how things are going to go for the Church of America today. I was reading an article this week by Tom Rainer. Tom Rainer says this: churches in the United States have entered a new season of ministry. Gone are the days when church attendance is the societal norm. For most of our American history, cultural and technological change was gradual, sufficiently paced for churches to where churches were maybe only 5 to 10 years behind what was going on as far as technology. Today, a lot of churches, and most churches probably in the United States, are lagging 20 to 30 years behind as the speed of changes increases dramatically. To many people today in our society, church seems irrelevant. No big deal. Tom goes on to say, several thousand churches close every year in the United States. And that pace, he says, will accelerate unless the congregations of those churches begin to make some changes. And some of those changes may have to be some dramatic changes. I read this week, this quote. This is not from Tom Rainer, but it says this: only dead fish go with the flow. Don't be a dead fish. You see, it seems like today, here's what we're tempted to do. We are tempted, as Tom talks about, to blame secular culture, national politics, or church leaders for the declining evangelical influence in today's culture. See, if outside forces and cultures were the reason behind declining and non-influential churches, we would likely have no churches today. And the reason Tom says that is this: the greatest periods of church growth, particularly in the first century, took place in adversarial cultures of that time. See, we are not hindered by external forces. And this is tough. But Tom says we are hindered by our own lack of commitment, selfishness, and evangelistic urgency. Hear me well, Tom says, church leaders. For many of your churches, the choice is simple: change or die. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily fits the mold at Hopewell today. But the reason I share this is we don't want to make sure we don't get to that position. Tom says we must remember our purpose if we're going to continue to be the church that we need to be. We must become houses of prayer, he says. We must cease seeing the church as a place of comfort and stability in the midst of rapid change. We must emphasize evangelism and discipleship. And we must focus externally rather than internally. See, when God gives a vision, something inside of the person, something inside of us begins to change. When God gives us a vision, whether it be us as individuals or as a group of followers in the church, it begins to consume our thoughts. Every move we make, we begin to dwell on that burden that God has placed on our heart. and in our mind. Andy Stanley says in his book here called Visioneering, he says this: without God's vision, you may find yourself in the all too common position on looking back on life that was given to accumulating green pieces of paper with pictures of dead presidents on them. Accumulating money or stuff. That's a vision of sorts, but it's a kind of vision that leaves men and women wondering if there was more to life than collecting green pieces of paper. Wondering what maybe they could have done or should have done with their brief stay here on this little ball of dirt. You see, visions are born in the soul of people who are torn or consumed with the tension between what is and what could be. Think about that as the church. What is today, but what could be this year. What could be done versus should be done. Something has to happen. You see, vision is a clear mental picture, and vision is a preferred future. Most of you have heard a guy by the name of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is found in the Old Testament, the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a Jew. He was a Jew that was in exile. Nehemiah served as the cupbearer for King Artaxerxes, who was the king of Persia at this particular time. And here's what happened, and you think about the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah's brother returned from a trip to Jerusalem. And of course, Nehemiah asked his brother, he said, hey, how's things going? How are the Jews getting along back home? And the answer that Nehemiah's brother gave him was very discouraging. He said, the survivors are oppressed and insulted. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down, and the gates have been burned. Well, Nehemiah mourned for days, the scripture tells us, fasting and praying to God, asking God to keep his promise that if his people repented, he would restore their homeland. The king, for whatever reason, noticed that Nehemiah was sad. And so he asked Nehemiah, he said, Nehemiah, what's troubling you? What's bothering you? I can tell there's a burden that you have. See, Nehemiah felt something. Nehemiah was burdened. And this burden that Nehemiah had caused him to go into a prolonged period of prayer. In Nehemiah 1:4 it says, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. When was the last time we did that, folks? When was the last time that we sat down and wept because of situations that are going on in our culture and in our world today? When was the last time that we mourned and we fasted and we prayed before God? You see, Nehemiah's vision didn't begin as a vision, but it began as a burden or a concern. It began as a burden for his nation and for his people. As Christians, any vision that we can think of will always fall short and leave us wondering. Unless we address and allow that burden to get into our lives and cause us to, that burden to become a vision of what could be in our own lives or in the lives of our church. See, we serve a great God. Most of you are aware, I think, that there are no two snowflakes that are alike. And that just blows my mind as you think about that. Oh, there's got to be at least two that are alike. But no two snowflakes are identical. You see, God has never made really two of anything alike. See, God's vision for you or for me, and this sometimes I think this is when we get into trouble, is when we begin to have a vision, we got to realize that the vision or the burden that God gives us is not like someone else's. We don't want to try to mold into someone else. We have to discover God's vision for our future. Or your life may become just a rerun. Same is true of the church. We can't necessarily do something or begin whatever it be, a mission or whatever, just because someone else is doing it. Now, granted, at times we may have that in front of us to where someone else has done it before. But why not become the front runners? Why not come up with things that no one else has thought about to reach people for Jesus Christ? What would happen if our churches today, in our own Christian lives today, if each of us strive to connect to God's vision and God's purpose for our lives? As we begin this new year, as we think about, what's my purpose here as a group of followers at Hopewell? What does God want me to do? Now, two things about a vision, and then we'll move on to some more of Nehemiah. As I mentioned, a vision begins as a concern. Pretty much most of the time. You'll hear something, you'll see something that gets your attention. Something will bother you about the way things are, or the way things are headed. The idea of Mach 4, that one day when Ted said, I think we need to start this whatever group of guys just to help the community. There was a burden there. There are people in our community that needed wood. There are people in our community that needed, ramps built. There are people in our community that needed monetary gifts. And out of that has came a really tremendous ministry. Out of that vision, out of that burden. New Year's Day. How many were there? 26 guys showed up to cut wood. And I don't know how many cords of wood or whatever we cut. There was a bunch. And I know there were some guys that, including myself, and basically all I did was clutch a tractor back and forth and turn the steering wheel. But some of the guys ran chainsaws, splitters, loading, unloading. Tanner, were you tired at the end of that day? Yeah. Tanner worked his tail off. He really did. And so did a lot of other guys. But what a blessing to be able to go and help some people. See, that's what we're talking about when we think about a vision. And I can remember as Ted shared with me about that. He said, what do you think we should do? And I said, you need to do it. Just do it. And don't wait on me. Or don't wait on someone else. But just do it. And I think that's so true in our lives today. See, here's what will happen a lot of times. You'll hear or see something. Something will bother you or me. And unlike many passing concerns, maybe this one will stick with you. You will find yourself thinking about them or this in your free time. You might even begin to lose some sleep over it. And you won't be able to let it go because you just can't let it go. Nehemiah's concern over the condition of Israel consumed him. It broke his heart. And thoughts of what was as opposed to what could be brought tears to his eyes. See, this wasn't just a casual concern that Nehemiah had. It was a vision in the making. So in our own lives, what life's event literally stirs your soul to emotion, drawing you to pray heartfelt and deep prayers? It is here where we begin. That's our starting point. As individuals, as followers of Jesus Christ, and as the church here at Hopewell. From this point, we ask God, direct me, show me, and lead me as I approach this vision. See, a vision does not necessarily require immediate attention. And I think this is something that's very important. When Nehemiah began to weep and pray and fast after hearing the report of the condition of Jerusalem, he didn't immediately run to Jerusalem. He didn't even make up a reason for the king to allow him to go. He simply just prayed and waited for God to respond and direct. And for God to fill specifically in all the blanks, to fill in the blanks on the reasons for and how to make this vision that Nehemiah had a reality. See, most of the time, a vision doesn't require immediate action, but it always requires patience. It is a process that yields a product worth waiting for. See, too often, when a person with an idea that seems to be a God-ordained vision, if you charge out, or if we charge out the gate too early, a lot of times the result is failure. A lot of times it can be discouragement. And it can simply sometimes be disillusionment. When we charge out too early. When we're not like Nehemiah and we pray about it and we continue to lift it up to God and say, you lead. You direct. See, we have to wait upon the Lord. Why wait, you say? Why wait? Hey, let's go. Let's do it. See, Nehemiah didn't sneak away in the night. He didn't fabricate a story to leave. He didn't share his burden with other concerned Jews. He just chose to wait. And he knew what we sometimes have a hard time remembering. What could be and should be. What could be and should be can't be until God is ready. So Nehemiah waited. Isaiah 40. A vision begins as concern. A vision does not require immediate action. Isaiah 40:31 spells it out best when it says that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. You see, there's the verse. I'm sorry, I lost my page there. So as we think about being people of vision, talking about eagles, most of you are aware that eagles can see very, very long distances. They have a tremendous vision. Matter of fact, they claim they can see up to 5 miles. See, the eagle knows where it's going and determines how it's going to get there. It's interesting, while other birds migrate by instinct, the eagle stays in its territory throughout the year. Season after season. Once it establishes that territory, once an eagle nests around here, they're probably going to be here, that pair, for a long time, unless something happens. The eagle is dependable. It will hold its place in its territory. When a storm approaches, other birds will fly in fear. But the eagle is energized by the challenge of the storm. See, the eagle catches the wind and rises above the storm. The eagle glides through its territory during the storm and will only leave its post if it's badly hurt and it has to leave in order to repair its injuries. See, I believe God is looking for men and women today, men and women of vision, who can see with their spiritual eyes, who can catch the wind of God's Spirit. And these men and women are like eagles. They are dependable. They are focused. They are fearless when it comes to their God-given assignments. In Nehemiah 6, when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall and that no gap was left in it, though at the time I had not installed the doors and the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me a message. This is Nehemiah speaking. Come, let's meet together in the villages of the Ono Valley. But they were planning to harm me. So I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work and cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? See, the world can be hard on a vision. See, a vision is about change. And we as human beings and people don't like change. Andy Stanley says it this way in his book, Deep and Wide. He says this. And here's the thing, he says. Here's the thing. If I was looking at you over a cup of coffee, this is what I would look right into your eyes and say. Kenny, Rosemary, Paul, Carolyn, Dennis, you have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to stay on that wall. You have no idea what hangs in the balance relationally, financially, in terms of impact, impacting the city, impacting the country, impacting the world. You have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to look down and say, I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. So whatever your thing is, that one thing, whatever that one thing is for this year, my hope and my prayer for us is that we'll walk out these doors this morning, and when the enemy starts whispering, and you may not even make it to the door until he starts whispering, and when the people around us start gossiping, and when our own family don't understand, we'll just whisper, I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. See, let's continue to build a church full of men and women of great faith. Men and women who are confident that God is who He says He is, and that He will do precisely what He has promised to do. You see, here's the key, I think. People whose lives and responses to life cause the community to look up and take notice. We need to be the people whose lives and responses to life cause the community to look up and take notice. When you go to a restaurant, there are things you remember about that restaurant. You remember the atmosphere. You remember the food. You remember the service. You don't see who cleans in preparation for your arrival at the restaurant. You don't see who prepares the meal, which might be a good thing at times, especially if you go to McDonald's, and the hard work that goes into every entree. All you see at most restaurants, especially a sit-down restaurant, is the server. You hear the server's voice, you experience the server's attitude, their joy, their attention, and even their kindness. You see, this tells me that the owner tries to only put those who would best represent the restaurant, its reputation, its value, its total trust as a whole in the possession of the server. So as servants of the Lord, folks, He puts everything on the line when He calls us to be servants. The Lord puts His trust and confidence into the very one that He created. So my question to us today, are we representing the owner of our souls? Would someone return to you because you fully represented the name, the image, the love of the one called Jesus? Or would you ever see those people again? If you go to a restaurant and you're treated badly and it's not good, what's the chances of you going back? Probably not very good. Unless maybe it changes ownerships or something like that. So would someone return to you? How we represent our walk, our faith, our love for the Lord is truly key. And I believe this with all my heart. It's truly key to how effective we as servants or servers of God's kindness. As servers, as servants, do our actions, our presence, our hearts truly represent the trust God has placed in us? See, we need to be checking on our place, our restaurant, in all of this. You see, that was the kind of faith, that was the kind of servanthood, that was the kind of followers that fueled the church through the trials of the first 3 centuries. They were under fire. They were under trial. But they didn't blame it on their culture. They accepted that fact. And they had a kind of faith that sustained. May we be that way in 2020. So what's God called you to do? What's God laid on your heart to do? This morning we asked the question in Bible study, which that's at 9 o'clock for some of you that would like to come and join us. The question was this: can you be a follower and not a disciple of Jesus Christ? Sure. You can be, right? You can be a follower. But we were studying Matthew where Jesus said, you gotta give it all. You gotta give it all. And that's what a disciple does. So are you a member of Hopewell, and that's good enough? Or in 2020, do you want to raise that stake a little bit and say, I'm going to be a disciple for Hopewell to reach our community? Moving from inward thought processes to outward thought processes. I heard someone say one time, well, that fund or that money is for us in the church. Now, wait a minute. I don't understand that mindset. Now, granted, there's things that we can do to help us all, but our mission must be the people out there, to evangelize and to reach the lost of our community. When was the last time I invited someone to church at Hopewell? When was the last time one of you invited someone to church? I was thinking this week, I'd like to throw a challenge out to you. Maybe, here it is. Every week, we are required to invite one person to church. For 52 weeks, every week, just invite someone. I don't care who it is. Invite your dog if you want to. If that will help you practice doing it, then invite Tippy. Tippy, would you come to church? Because that's how easy it is, folks. Just say, hey, we'd love to have you in Hopewell for church. 10:30 Sunday morning. Hope to see you. Simple as that. And folks, think about that. If every one of us would do that every week for 52 weeks, think how many invites that would be throughout the year. That's a bunch. That's a bunch. Let's pray. Father God, we just thank you for your love. We thank you for what you're going to do. We just give you praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.